Ryan had been looking forward to this weekend for weeks. His parents were going out of town, and that meant one thing: a sleepover with his best friend, Jason. No early curfews, no interruptions, just a night of video games, horror movies, and eating whatever they wanted. By 10 p.m., Jason had arrived, throwing his backpack onto the couch as he cracked open a soda. They settled into the living room, controllers in hand, the glow of the TV reflecting off their faces. Ryan's house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happened. It felt safe. By midnight, the excitement had faded into lazy exhaustion. The game had been paused for over an hour, forgotten as they scrolled through their phones. The house had settled into silence except for the occasional rustling of junk food wrappers. Then, somewhere upstairs, a door creaked. Neither of them reacted at first. The house was old. Things like this happened. Maybe the air pressure had shifted. Maybe a window had been left cracked open. Jason glanced toward the hallway, his face briefly tense, but he shrugged it off. An hour later, Jason got up to use the bathroom. As he walked past the stairs, something caught his eye. The attic hatch. It was slightly open. His stomach twisted. He was sure it hadn't been like that earlier. He hesitated for a moment, staring at the dark opening above him. There was no way anyone had gone up there. Unsettled, he hurried back to the living room, but he didn't say anything. Maybe it had been like that all along. Maybe he just hadn't noticed. At 3 a.m., Ryan stirred awake. He didn't know why at first, until he heard it. Soft breathing. His first instinct was to assume it was Jason. But then he realized something. The breathing wasn't coming from the floor. It was coming from above. His body went stiff. The slow, steady sound of someone exhaling, inhaling, was coming from the attic. A wave of cold panic crawled up his spine. He nudged Jason, barely breathing himself. Jason groggily woke up, but the second he heard it, he froze too. They both listened. The breathing was still there, not moving, not fading, just hovering above them. Ryan grabbed his phone with shaky hands and called his father. His voice was barely steady as he explained the situation. His father, now fully awake, told them to lock themselves in a room and wait. Minutes dragged by like hours. Every sound in the house made them flinch. The breathing didn't change, didn't get closer, didn't disappear. It was just there. Finally, the sound of a car in the driveway. A door slammed outside. Heavy footsteps entered the house. Ryan's father was here. The boys stayed huddled together as he made his way toward the attic ladder. His face was unreadable as he reached for the hatch and slowly pulled it open. The attic was dark. Stale air rushed down. He climbed up. Then, he stopped. There, in the farthest corner of the attic, was a crumpled blanket. Next to it, an empty water bottle and candy wrappers. Candy that neither Ryan nor Jason had eaten. It was clear now. Someone had been living in their attic, watching them, listening to them. The attic was empty now, but the thought that whoever had been up there had been so close was more terrifying than anything else. The police came, but no one was ever found. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no broken locks. The only thing they knew for sure: the attic hatch had been closed earlier that day, which meant whoever had been up there had opened it that night, and maybe they hadn't planned to stay hidden forever. Sleepovers are always fun, at least they're supposed to be. Emma had been looking forward to this night all week. Movies, snacks, and late-night talks with her closest friends, the ones she had known for years. but some nights don't go as planned. By 8 p.m., the usual group had gathered in her living room: Hannah, Lily, and Sophia. They had done this countless times before, spending hours laughing, scrolling through their phones, and talking about school, relationships, and the kind of meaningless things that felt important at their age. The air smelled like buttered popcorn, and the artificial sweetness of soda, and the sound of overlapping conversations filled the space. Then Sophia arrived, and she wasn't alone. "This is my cousin, Ava," she had said casually, as if it was an afterthought. Emma hadn't been expecting anyone new. There was a brief moment of hesitation before she smiled and welcomed her in. No one questioned it. It was just one extra person. Ava sat apart from the group, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. She barely reacted to anything, never laughed at the jokes, or added to the conversation. When someone spoke directly to her, she would blink, hesitate, then nod, or give the shortest possible response. At first, it didn't seem like much. Some people were just shy, especially around new people. But as the evening went on, her presence became harder to ignore. She barely moved. She barely seemed to blink. Emma noticed it first. There was something unnatural about the way Ava held herself, stiff, unmoving, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. It wasn't just awkwardness, it was something else, something harder to define. The others continued chatting, occasionally acknowledging her, but she never joined in. Instead, she just watched. That was what unsettled Emma the most. Whenever they turned their attention away from Ava, it was as if she wasn't there at all. But the moment someone looked at her again, it felt like they were being watched too intently. At one point, while scrolling through her phone, Emma glanced up and caught Ava staring at her. Not in a curious way, not even in an uncomfortable way, just staring. Her expression never changed. By midnight, the unease had settled deep in Emma's stomach. She glanced at her friends, wondering if anyone else felt it, but they were still lost in their usual routine, laughing at memes, flipping through a playlist of songs they'd all heard 100 times before. No one else seemed to notice. The night carried on. They moved to the bedroom, laying out blankets and setting up their sleeping bags. Sophia's had been placed next to Ava's, though no one had seen her actually touch it. It remained folded, untouched, resting against the wall. At around 1 a.m., Emma's mother passed by the room. Half asleep, she checked in on them, smiling as she leaned against the doorframe. She only asked one simple question: "Where's Ava sleeping?" The words barely registered at first. Then, instinctively, all 4 girls turned to the spot where Ava had been sitting just minutes before. She was gone. Her sleeping bag was still neatly folded in the corner, untouched. No one had seen her leave. A quick search of the house followed. The bathroom, the kitchen, the hallway, nothing. The front door was still locked. The windows were closed. Sophia looked the most confused of all. She reached for her phone and called her aunt, assuming Ava had quietly slipped out and gone home early without saying anything. Her mother answered groggily. Ava had been home all night. She had never come to the sleepover. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest, heavy and suffocating. Then, one by one, they turned back to the empty spot where she had been sitting for hours. They had talked around her, sat next to her, felt her watching them. Ava was at home. So who had been with them? Sophia tried to laugh it off, muttering something about how maybe her mother had misunderstood, but no one responded. No one knew what to say. Lily checked the front door again, still locked. Hannah checked the bathroom again, empty. Emma sat frozen, replaying the night in her head. Ava had been right there next to them, close enough to touch. Hadn't she? The silence stretched longer. It was a silence that made the walls feel closer, the air feel heavier. No one slept. The sleepover ended early the next morning. No one wanted to admit they were too unsettled to stay longer, but there was an unspoken agreement that it was best to leave. No one mentioned it again, not because they forgot, because no one wanted to remember. If you enjoyed these creepy sleepover stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes you're not as alone as you think. See you in the next one.